Welcome to the Code With Me videos for Chapter 12. In this first video, we're going to be talking about the color aspect. So if you will, go ahead and open up brackets and open up your Chapter 12 folder from the data file from the book. Load Chapter 12 into brackets, making it easier to work with. And go ahead and load the index file from the color folder in your browser. You'll notice that the file itself has some text on it. It's a little hard to read because of the background color, but we'll get to that in just a minute. When you go ahead and take a look at the code inside of this index file, you'll notice that, well, we have a div tag that is being used. And the div tag right now is being used because it has no semantic meaning and it's only used for visual styling to limit the width of the content and to center it in the browser window. We'll learn how to do this later in the book. Once you also view the CSS inside the CSS folder and colors.css, chances are there's a lot here that hopefully you pretty much recognize from the other videos, but if not, don't worry, we're going to go through it all. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to be working inside this CSS folder. We're not going to modify the index.html right now. We're going to work on the CSS file, which is the external style sheet. So inside the CSS folder and colors.css. The first thing we're doing is we're going to be adding everything below this set of comments right here. So this is a comment and this is a comment. Basically this one says do not edit anything above this line. Okay, no worries about that. The next one says begin your styles below this comment, and it has a lot of asterisks and the starting and ending slash. So that way, we're going to start adding our information below that. The first thing we're going to be doing is writing body. Now don't forget that CSS rules the declarations start and end with the curly braces. So inside body, we're going to write color. And with that, we're going to say RGB, parentheses, 255, 0, and 0. And end with a semicolon. Before I save and refresh, keep in mind that the color property is only going to affect the text itself. Color by itself, by default, only affects text. Everything else we're going to be working with affects everything else, but color works on just text. So let's go ahead and save this. Let's refresh, and now you notice that all of our text is now red. It's not that much easier to see, but hopefully you can see the comparison between the red versus the black on a white and black background. Now the color property cascades down, and all the colors of all the text and all their descendants, all the elements inside the body right here, are now red. So now we're going to add a second property or rule in the div, opening and closing curly brace, tab over, background color RGB, parentheses, 255, 255, 255. Now this means that we're using the far right end of the spectrum, which means that by combining all the colors together, we create white. And because this is working with a div, if we review the index page, you notice that the body is right here, and then the div. So let's take a look, save the CSS, go to the browser, and refresh. And now you notice that the div has a background color of white, and all of the text inside, because it's inside the body, is now red. So this way it makes it a little easier to work with. Now the text is readable because it's on a white background because we set the div background to white. None of the page background texture shows through the white, and while you used integer values for both rules, the RGB here and the RGB here, you could also have used percent values such as 100%, 100%, and 100%. This will also get you white as well, but it's up to you which one you would like to use. If you keep the number 0 to 255 working for you, that's perfectly fine. If you want to use the 0 to 100%, also perfectly fine. Both are perfectly acceptable. Gotta put that back, making it easier. There we go. Next activity, we're going to edit the background color declaration of line 29. and use RGBA. So here we have line 29, background color, RGB, and we're going to modify it to say RGBA. Now don't forget that RGBA also needs a fourth value. In this case, we're going to set it to 0.45. Don't forget that inside the alpha layer, the values are between 0 and 1. So it is a decimal value. You can say 0.4, you can say 0.5, you can say 0.45, you can say 0.666666666. As long as there is a decimal value, it will be interpreted. So let's save, let's refresh, and now we see that our background is semi-transparent. At this point, it is 45% transparent. If we say 0.15, we save, we refresh, you notice that the background, although it's still there, is almost gone. Whereas if we go to the opposite end and say 95% or 0.95, we refresh, and now we can see a little bit of transparency, but the majority of the white background is still there. Changing it back to 45 for now. Add a new rule down here, H1, curly brace, color RGBA, 62, 95, 62.75, and then semicolon. Save. Now where is the H1? The H1 is right here, CSS colors. So we make sure we save our CSS, we go to the browser, we refresh, and now you see that the H1 is now transparent. But if you also notice that the background itself can be seen through the letters, that's because the color of the H1 is now transparent with the transparent alpha layer. You notice that brackets also gives you a nice little version of the green that it's trying to display with a bit of transparency in the actual sample of the color it wants to show. Now, if this is a little hard for you to comprehend, don't worry, we'll also cover opacity later to make everything transparent, but in this case, just because we're setting the color to transparent, that means we can see through it. Alright, next we're going to lessen the transparency. Oh look, going back to 95%. So save, refresh, and now, even though this is semi-transparent, you can still see this along with the red text on a semi-transparent white background. All right, next activity, line 36. We're going to say main. We're going to say color. And now we're going to use a hex code. So #, 731F, A0. Yes, it is a 0. The letter O does not exist in hex. So let's save, let's refresh, and you'll notice that the content inside main is now a nice soft purple, and brackets does give us the preview of that. You'll notice that we're using the hex 6 here only because none of these letters or characters repeat at all. So because they don't repeat, we cannot use the short version or hex 3. Alright, now the page heading and the first paragraph right here have not changed. Why? Well, if you take a look at the code, you'll notice that we have only modified the information in main. The H1 and the P are inside this header, and the header is not affected by the main selector. All right, next we're going to say line 40. So P, curly brace, tab over, background color, EFF44. Now before we proceed, I want to call out one thing. Because we're using a hex 6 version here, and because we have 3 sets of repeating values, this can actually be decreased to hex 3 by just saying EF4, which produces the exact same color, in this case yellow. Now also, before I go on, can you determine how many different P sections will actually be, or will have a background color of this yellow? Let's take a look. Save, refresh, and look at that. all of the p tags, including the one in the header, now has a background color. That's because this selector works with every single p tag on the page, no matter where it is. We'll get to a section in a future chapter about how to specifically target specific tags inside other tags, but for right now we're just dealing with the generic selector for the whole page. All right, next one is 12.4. Now we're going to work with comments. So basically this stuff right here. Let's see, examine the existing comment on line 1. Basic styling, do not edit. That's okay, that's a comment. Line 17, do not edit anything above this line. Okay, that's a comment. And line 19 to 22. This starts the comment, this ends the comment, and everything in between from this asterisk all the way to that asterisk is part of a comment. Only because it starts with the slash and asterisk and ends with the asterisk and slash, just like this right here, and the one above. So anything you put between the slash and the asterisk, no matter what it is, as long as it's put in this format, will be a comment in CSS. So now we're going to go to line 23. We're going to do enter, going to add a slash and an asterisk, and type in examples of color codes. Now if you notice, brackets automatically colorizes the comment for us. But because we haven't closed it, it doesn't know where the end of the comment is. So once we put an asterisk and a slash, it should automatically recolorize everything because we have now ended the comment. Don't forget that these versions of comments can only be done in CSS files and embedded CSS. You can't go in here and try to add an HTML comment in here because, well, CSS files don't know what to do with that. So therefore, we can't use HTML comments. But CSS has their own version of comments, and just with HTML comments, you can put whatever you want inside of them. All right, very end of the CSS file, after the final P rule, we're going to tap enter twice and type in the following multi-line comment. So slash, bunch of asterisks. How many you put does not matter. New line, CSS colors. New line, hex 6, hex 3, RGB parentheses, RGBA parentheses, keywords, bunch of asterisks, and close. I'm going to clean this up a little bit. There we go. Now the extra asterisk symbols make it easier to understand visually when we're dealing with the actual code of the CSS file, because it's a lot easier to see a bunch of asterisks lined up than it is just one line of a comment. So this way it grabs our attention and tells us exactly where a comment will be placed. Now before we go on, let's take the code we have and try to validate it. So save, select all, copy, and let's go to Jigsaw. CSS validator. By direct input, paste, and check. Yay, big green bar, no errors found. Double checking for the human error. All of that should be good. We're good, we're good. Okay, RGB, comma, comma, RGBA, comma, 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 RGBA, comma, 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 color, hex 6, background color, hex 3, and a comment. Good. All right, for the next one, we're actually going to be working with a Chrome extension. So go ahead and go to Google and look up the, well, I'm sorry, we already have this one. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the wave evaluation tool from last time. So go back to the CSS color page, we refresh, go to the wave tool. In the first paragraph, I'm sorry, we need to do contrast. There we go. So the first paragraph with the red text is being identified by the evaluation tool as having poor contrast. Click the Desaturate page link at the bottom of the sidebar. Desaturate, there it is, very bottom. So all color at this point is removed and the page displays as grayscale, letting you preview the page as some colorblind users may see it, allowing you to gauge the luminosity contrast. Click the Resaturate page link to bring back the color. Click the red box icon in the top or in the upper left corner of the first paragraph to select it, so this one right here. And the colors used for the text and background are loaded into the sidebar, allowing you to experiment with tweaking the color combination. Notice that the bottom area of the sidebar indicates that the contrast is only 3.62 to 1, and thus fails for normal text size conformance. To fix this and find accessible colors, what we're going to do is we're actually going to modify the colors themselves to make them lighter or darker. So what we're going to do is we're going to click the foreground color, which is right here, and click darker once. And you'll notice that our contrast ratio changes to 4.6. For AA, we pass. For AAA, we fail. But that's okay because this is something we're going to work with later. So with the background color, I'm going to click lighter once. And now it's a 4.65 to 1, but it still fails the AAA. So click the foreground color to darker link 2 more times, and notice the contrast ratio increases to 7.95, or I'm sorry, 7.95 to 1, which satisfies the AAA conformance right here. And notice the new suggested colors are, where is it? New suggested color is A20000. And the background is F2FF62. So you may be satisfied with achieving the AA conformance level, but it depends on how accessible you want your site to be. So return to brackets and display the code for colors.css, which we are. Edit the color declaration at line 26 right here. And we're going to change RGB to a hex. So we started with the pound sign and use the suggestion that was suggested by the tool itself. Now keep in mind that because we are not repeating A2, we cannot shorten this to hex 3. We can only use hex 6. So don't try to get fancy and say A200 because, well, you can't use that in hex. Hex has to be either 6 or 3. Alright, line 42 down here, we're going to modify this hex from 3 to 6 by saying F2FF62, which is what is suggested. We save, we refresh the page, and now we're using the contrast suggestions as made by the Wave tool. We're going to click the Wave tool one more time and click Contrast. And look, no contrast issues were detected. So we are good to go. The last one we're going to do in this video is deal with the luminosity contrast. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to go to the web store. So chrome.google.com web store. And we're going to type in WCAG luminosity. And we should locate the WCAG luminosity contrast ratio analyzer. That is a name. And just make sure it's the right one. It should be by Horia Tudosier, and I probably butchered that name. Add to Chrome, add extension. You can read the options page here, but don't make any changes because it's a little hard to understand right now, but don't worry. Once we get into more details, it should make a lot more sense. Okay, we're going to close this page, close the Chrome Web Store, and go back to our page over here. Let's refresh just to make sure we got things right, and then you can click on the little handicap icon in the top right of the browser. A pop-up window displays contrast ratio information for some of the text on the page, but it is unclear exactly where on the page it is. This tool works best when you manually test colors. So click the Pick Colors button at the bottom. Let's make sure that's the very bottom. Yeah, this one. Pick Colors. Does it give me anything? Come on. Okay, let's refresh. Let's pick colors. It's not letting me do anything. So if you're wondering about the situation, if you click on the icon and then click Pick Colors and the window goes away, that's because the extension itself may not actually work on local files. However, if you're working on external files or a local server, then you can certainly use that as well. So for example, instead of using a file prefix or file protocol, I've uploaded this to my personal server on my laptop, and now I'm able to run the pick color extension. So once you get that up and going, you'll have a magnifying glass and a set of crosshairs. And the crosshairs and magnifying glass or bubble move together. Whatever the crosshair is over is magnified in the bubble or the glass. Inside the bubble is a square, and if you keep your eye on the center of the crosshair and in the top left corner of that square as you move the mouse, you'll pass over different colors in the summary strip, which is this right here. At the top of the page shows the hex 6 color code along with the sample of the color in the right edge of the summary. So for example, we click on this purple right here, you can see that the contrast is actually provided. So move the crosshairs so that it's over a white area in the content of the background, near the head icon at the bottom of the page. There we go, head icon. Ensure the square inside the magnifying bubble is over a white area, and then left click to set the background color. So we've done that. Move the crosshair so that it's over the head icon in the bottom of the page. Ensure the top left corner of the square inside the magnifying bubble is over the gray area of the head icon, and then right click to set the foreground color. And right clicking is not working on a Mac. Well, regardless, the boxes in the summary strip show the white background color from the left click, and then the sample text shows the gray color from the right click, if it works. There are two boxes so you can see the difference between small and large text. Of course, you are testing the colors in an image, not text. So think of it as a foreground background rather than text background. Regardless, the contrast ratio should be about 2.41 to 1, depending on exactly where you clicked. Once you click the icon again, the summary strip disappears and we're back with the actual window. And the colors that we picked before are in the pop-up window. You're encouraged to read the documentation that comes with this color ratio analyzer, as there is more it can certainly do. The background color is already about as light as it can be. The only option is to achieve color contrast accessibility conformance by editing the image to make it darker. Editing images is outside the scope of this book, and you'll need to learn some graphic editing software, such as Adobe Photoshop or GIMP, to edit images. So for now, let's just go back to our local page, go back to brackets. Let's move Chrome down a bit so we can actually see what we're doing. And edit the index page. On the index page, we're actually going to go in and we'll find line 34. Line 34 right here with the image. And we're going to say images. We're going to change that to darker.png. which is a darker version of the same image. So we save the page, we go down just to make sure, we load it, and now you can see that the contrast right here is certainly a lot more than the previous one we had. So if you want, you can check the luminosity item once more, and you'll be able to see that the contrast for this is about 5.8 to 1. So as long as it's 4.5 to 1, it conforms to level AA. Okay, so that is it for this section of videos. In the next section of videos, we're going to be talking about more advanced things like the box model, and then getting into backgrounds. If you have any questions about this or anything in Chapter 12, please send me an email or hit me up on Twitter, and I'll get back to you with the best possible answer that we can work through.